Hello everyone and welcome back to the Zesty Raisin. My name is Patrick and today I want to tell you about my first cruise experience which took place this past weekend. So this past weekend I went on my first cruise ever with Royal Caribbean on their Freedom of the Seas ship, and it was a pretty incredible experience. So here in Tampa, I live about 2 blocks from the cruise port here in Tampa. If I go to our 6th floor terrace here at my condo complex, I can actually see the cruise ships right outside our condo complex. It's pretty incredible. With that being said though, Royal Caribbean actually does not sail out of Tampa this time of the year. They stopped sailing at the end of March. I wanted to sail Royal Caribbean, therefore I drove to Miami in order to sail with Royal Caribbean. Why did I want to sail with Royal Caribbean? Well, I was researching, I was kind of deciding between Royal Caribbean and Norwegian. When it came down to the dates I was looking at, the specific weekend I was looking at, which was Easter weekend, and the cost of the cruise and just kind of reputation and their network that they have built, and that Royal Caribbean is a massive cruise line. So they just have a bigger network of ships available and more excursions available. That's kind of the main reason why I went with Royal Caribbean. I would still love to sail Norwegian someday, eventually, later down the road. But I was very, very happy with my Royal Caribbean cruise experience. If you hear some tapping in the background or some clinking and clanging, that's because my dog Dessa, she's chewing on a dog bone right now and she's loving it. So I apologize if you hear some weird noises in the background. So anyway, today I wanna take some time to talk about some of the pros, cons, and just general statistics about sailing with Royal Caribbean and my experience going on my first cruise ever. So first we're gonna start with the pros. I was really, really surprised at how elegant the dinner dining room is. When people think about cruising, they often think about the transatlantic ships like the Titanic, which, by the way, there are very few of those that still exist, but often they think of those types of ships, and everything is so elegant and upscale and nice and fancy, and only like the super, super rich can afford them, and this, that, and the other. So that's what people think, but then like myself, I don't know, kind of going around the world a bit and just kind of like watching cruise vlogs and all that stuff, it seems like in most people's pictures and videos, they rarely ever feature that main dinner dining room. They usually just show like the big food halls and stuff, and they're really not that nice. They're just kind of like quick grab and go buffet, that kind of stuff. They usually don't feature the more upscale dining hall very often. So anyway, the dining hall, the main dining room that's only open for dinner, where you have your set time, you have to go, you have about an hour to eat, then you gotta go because then the next group needs to come in. On Freedom of the Seas with Royal Caribbean, this dining room had like big old chandeliers, golden archways, the waiters and waitresses were absolutely excellent. They had steak on the menu, multiple types of fish, and I was really, really, really impressed. Once they learn your name, they will call you by your name at the main dining room. So that was a really cool experience. I was very impressed. I only had dinner in the main dining room one night. That was my first night. I did have a steak. I will admit that the steak was not the best quality. If you're familiar with how a lot of Latin American countries make their steak, like Puerto Rico and stuff, it was kind of more along those lines, where it wasn't like that thick, juicy cut of steak. It was more like a thinner, slightly more fatty version. So not saying it was bad, it just wasn't necessarily the type of steak that I prefer. But with that being said, it was free. It was included in the cost of the cruise. So can I really complain? Not really. I was very, very impressed with the main dinner dining room. Next thing is the customer service. I'll talk a little bit more about the stateroom attendant specifically later on in this video, but I was absolutely blown away by the customer service on this cruise ship. As a former Disney cast member and as somebody who worked in hospitality and entertainment for 6-7 years, whatever, I was very, very, very impressed by the customer service, just the overall friendliness and helpfulness of every single team member on the ship. Speaking of the stateroom attendants, it didn't matter if it was my stateroom attendant or if it was another stateroom attendant in my hallway that was servicing other people's rooms. Every single one of them, regardless of how much English they speak, which by the way, most people are either bilingual, trilingual, or quadrilingual on cruise ships. Most people do speak multiple languages. But I mean, all of them were very friendly. They'd always say hi in passing, how's your day? That's something you don't often get from a housekeeping staff in a hotel. And in the end, what's the difference between a stateroom attendant and housekeeping? Not much. In the end, they're there to clean your room. So again, especially in the midst of like the COVID-19 pandemic and all these labor shortages, and the cruise line industry was hit really, really hard by COVID, since considering they were forced to be closed for nearly 2 years straight. The fact that they've been able to rebound like this and hire such exceptional staff is truly remarkable. So shout out to Royal Caribbean's friendly customer service. Next pro is the insane variety of food. So during my cruise, it was a 3-day cruise, by the way. It wasn't very long, but during my cruise, I had American cuisine, I had Mexican cuisine, I had Spanish cuisine, I had Japanese cuisine, I had Italian cuisine, and I can't even have pasta. Like, I'm gluten-free. There are a lot of foods I can't have, and even being on my wacky diet of being gluten-free, I was still able to have all of those things. And speaking of which, if you are on special, like if you do have special dietary restrictions, they are absolutely able to accommodate your requests. However, I will say that as somebody who is gluten-free, more of a gluten sensitivity than it is an actual full-on allergy or celiac disease, from my general observation, I do believe that people who have a gluten intolerance or gluten sensitivity may have an easier time than someone who's full-on vegan, who can't have dairy and can't have meat, because a very, very large portion of what they serve is meat-based and or has dairy. That's my general observation. Maybe if I were actually dairy-free and vegan, maybe I would think otherwise. But as somebody who is gluten-free, I had a very, very easy time finding foods that could accommodate my needs. Again, I don't have issues with cross-contamination, so there's a chance that maybe if I did have actual celiac disease, maybe I'd have a harder time. But as someone who just has a gluten sensitivity, a remarkable food selection to choose from. Well done. Next thing, the excursions are really, really fun. So I went into this cruise having 2 excursions booked. And what excursions are, basically they are little adventures that you can go on days when the ship is in a port. These are things that you usually have to pay extra for. They are not included in the upfront cost of your cruise. So I had booked 2 excursions. One of them ended up being canceled. It was a kayaking excursion I had booked. It was canceled because the wind was too strong and it just wasn't safe or pleasant to go kayaking. So Royal Caribbean canceled this excursion. They let me know it was being canceled. But it was really interesting because they didn't tell us in advance before getting off the ship. Rather, when I went to the place to get the kayak, they told me once I got to that place, we're not going kayaking today. So I kind of wish I would have had advance notice. But with that being said, I didn't have to ask for a refund. Sure enough, the next day when I looked at my bill, they had already taken that charge off. So that was really cool. I was surprised. It was only like a $60 excursion, so it was one of those things where if they hadn't refunded me, I wasn't gonna fight too much. But the fact that, again, this was an excursion that happened on land, or was supposed to happen on land / in a kayak in the water, and all the billing takes place on the ship, I was really, really surprised by their communication and their ability to refund me without even having to ask for a refund. So that was pretty cool. With that being said, there was one excursion I was able to go on. I did not read the description of this excursion closely at all. I thought it was gonna be like a history sightseeing tour in a car in Nassau in the Bahamas. So anyway, I got in line for this excursion, came to discover that we are going on a boat. Surprise! So I got on the boat, and once I was on the boat, they said, all right, so we're going on a 20-minute boat ride to the island. Mind you, we were already in Nassau. We were already on an island. So we are going to a different island via boat. And they said we are going to be on the island for 4 hours. I thought I was going on like a 1 hour car ride sightseeing tour in some antique vehicle or something. I don't know how I read the description of this excursion so epically wrong, but let me tell you, this excursion ended up being way better than I thought it was going to be. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to do on the island. It was literally myself and about 50 other people who were on this excursion. We were all on the island by ourselves. It had a really, really beautiful beach. They had kayaking, they had snorkeling. There's a little lighthouse on the island. We could go up in the lighthouse and get some incredible views. They did serve us lunch on the island. It was just like a chicken barbecue and fried fish, which I couldn't have, rice, beans, things along those lines. So, I mean, the food was not excellent on the island by any means. It was pretty generic. But the experience overall was really nice, and I was never really super overwhelmed by large crowds of people, but if I would have been, going on that excursion would have been an excellent, incredible, peaceful break from those hordes of people that sometimes you can experience and get overwhelmed by on the cruise ship. So I had a really good experience based on my first excursion. I would probably consider booking that excursion again if I were to go back to Nassau at some point in the future with Royal Caribbean. Next pro, overall the cruise was really, really peaceful. I went on Easter weekend, which is like peak spring break season for elementary and high schools. So there was a little bit of concern going into the cruise ship, like, oh no, I hope this ship isn't like inundated with elementary and high school students, with parents not caring what their kids do and just wreaking havoc on the ship. But Royal Caribbean, at least this ship in particular, Freedom of the Seas, they did a really good job at kind of keeping the kids and the adults separate. So they have a pool and a hot tub and a bar area that's just for 18 and over. Additionally, there's a section of the ship where they have like an arcade, some other games, and like an arts and crafts area, all clustered together for kids. So it is really cool how many activities they have for different age groups, and how much they are able to create a pleasant experience no matter what your age group is. If you're a retiree, if you're a parent, if you're someone like myself, 26 years or 27 years old, forgot how old I am, and cruising solo, or a child, they really do create a remarkable experience for everyone on board. The last pro I want to talk about is, again, the stateroom attendant. I kind of already touched on it a little bit, but again, I was on this cruise over the Easter weekend. Being such a big corporate, non-religious corporation such as Royal Caribbean, I wasn't necessarily expecting for them to do a whole lot for Easter. But sure enough, they did. The Easter Bunny visited my room twice, which is pretty cool, and that was all thanks to the stateroom attendant. So they created like a little Easter Bunny out of the towels. They did it on the night before Easter, and then the morning of Easter, they gave me 2 towel Easter bunnies, which is really cool. There was no candy or anything on the ship itself, but the port that we went to that day, they were handing out candy right when we got off the ship, which was really cool. All right, so that's a portion of the pros. I'm sure there are probably many more than just those. Now, I'm gonna get into some of the cons. And good news is there are way more pros than there are cons. So first off, first con, keep in mind that you are on a ship. And when you're on a ship, there's a lot of moisture. I stayed in the smallest room type on the ship, so maybe, not very likely, but maybe some of the larger rooms that have doors, that have balconies and have windows, maybe there's better ventilation in those suites. I'm not for certain. I'm gonna guess there's probably not, but with that being said, there's a lot of moisture in the ship, and when there's a lot of moisture, that means things don't dry well. So if you went swimming the day before and you hung your bathing suit up to dry in your bathroom or in your stateroom, don't expect for that bathing suit to be dry the next day. Same thing with your bath towel and your pool towel. If you took a shower or went swimming and you hung that towel up to dry inside your stateroom, don't expect for that towel to be dry the next day. It might never dry your entire cruise. If you're lucky, it might dry in about 24 hours or 48 hours if you're lucky. But there's a good chance it won't dry your entire cruise. I never had an issue with my stateroom being stuffy, but yeah, just know there's a lot of moisture and it takes quite a bit of time for things to dry, and they might not dry at all. So just kind of keep that in mind. Maybe pack a couple bathing suits, maybe pack a couple extra towels. if you're not going to rely solely on the ship's towels, which they do provide towels, by the way. So that's the first con. Second con, being in the 21st century, I'm so accustomed to facilities being non-smoking, where you can only smoke outdoors and you have to be X amount of feet from doorways. However, because most cruise ships are registered and certified in places that are not the United States, a lot of them are actually registered in the Bahamas, ironically, they don't have to adhere to a lot of federal standards here in the United States, such as smoking regulations. So if you go into the casino, there are people smoking in the casino. Good news is it's very ventilated, so it doesn't really affect the rest of the ship, but just know that there are going to be people smoking in the casino. If you're on the pool deck, there might be somebody smoking right next to you on the pool deck. Some of the pool decks are open air, so it's not a huge deal, but some of the pool decks actually have a roof over them, and there's really not a whole lot of air circulation sometimes, so you might smell it pretty far down if there's somebody smoking on the pool deck or multiple people. So that was one kind of turn off, is the fact of not a lot of people smoking, but there were some people smoking in some rather inconvenient places, and I didn't see a single no smoking sign anywhere on board other than in the staterooms, so it was a little odd. Third con, this is probably just a Patrick issue. I doubt this is an issue for most people, but for some reason, despite how obsessive I was with the app the entire time I was on board, I never saw when our departure times were. So I never really knew when the ship was going to be leaving the port for that day. Good news is, living so close to the cruise port here in Tampa, I generally know that cruise ships don't typically leave before 4 p.m. So I just kind of told myself, like, oh, I guess I gotta be back to the ship before 4 p.m. Otherwise the ship might leave without me, because nowhere on the mobile app could I see when the ship was leaving, which is weird because like it has a calendar feature and you can see all the activities going on for the day, but nowhere on there does it say when the ship's leaving. So next time I go on a Royal Caribbean cruise, I'll just ask the stateroom attendant or really anyone on the ship, and they can probably tell me. There's a chance that, so there's a little television inside each stateroom. There's a chance that maybe on the television it might have said, I was under the impression they were gonna slip little pieces of paper under the door each day with like an itinerary of sorts. They didn't do that. So I don't know where you find the times that lists when the ship's going to be leaving the port, but I did have to kind of dodge out of some things a little early and not stick on some islands a bit extra, just because I wasn't sure when the ship was going to be leaving. So I don't know. The next con, again, this is probably more of a Patrick issue. I probably just didn't do enough research, but there was a little bit of confusion with the COVID-19 testing. So generally speaking, everyone on the ship needs to be vaccinated. Everyone needs to present a negative COVID test that was taken within 48 hours of boarding the ship. However, what I did not know is that the test could not be a self-test. Maybe some cruise lines are different, but in the case of Royal Caribbean, based on my experience with this cruise, you are not allowed to do a self-test. So what I did was, the night before I did a test at home, I did a little nose swab. There's a QR code on that test that you were supposed to be able to scan, but for some reason my awesome iPhone didn't feel like scanning the QR code. So therefore there was no way for me to present those results when I got to the terminal to check in for my cruise. With that being said, I had another test that I brought with me. When I got to the cruise port, I was like, hey, I had this COVID test, where can I take it so that I can show you my negative test results? They said, step to the side, you can take it over there. So I stepped to the side, I took the COVID test, I had to wait 15-20 minutes for the results to show as instructed on the COVID test that I got from the federal government, by the way. This was an official government authorized test. So I went to one of the customer service people with Royal Caribbean, I showed them my test and they're like, oh, we can't do anything with that. They're like, you have to go outside and get tested out there. So I went outside, I got tested outside. It cost $110 to get tested outside. That was a little obnoxious. I was not expecting that. I didn't complain, I didn't gripe, because it was one of those things where I'm sure that the error was on my end. I'm sure I just didn't do enough research. But it's one of those things where, like, again, being more transparent, being more open, making information more available and more bold. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe it just wasn't bold enough. I don't know. But there was definitely some confusion on my end in terms of what tests are accepted and what tests are not accepted. It is what it is. The last con that I had, good news is you don't really feel the ship moving most of the time, at least not on this particular cruise. Freedom of the Seas is a respectably large cruise ship. It's definitely not the biggest in the industry, but it is definitely respectably large. So good news is you don't really feel the ship moving a whole lot. However, 2 of the 3 nights I was on the ship, I did wake up around 3 or 4 in the morning with the bed like violently shaking. It wasn't like big shaking, it was more small, but it was like really, really aggressive, really fast and rapid. It didn't last for very long. It was maybe like 10 or 15 minutes that it was shaking, but it definitely did wake me up 2 of the 3 nights. I'm not for certain what was happening when, like why the bed was being shook. I don't think there was a demon in my room. There might have been, but I don't think there was a demon in my room. My guess is that oftentimes for smaller cruise ports, the ships cannot pull into the port all the way, like to the dock themselves. They have to be kind of taxied or towed by a smaller vessel. And based on the timing, like based on the hour of the night that it was happening, it's my guess that that's probably what it was that towing process perhaps. Either that or maybe it was after we got into the port and they were just emptying their bowels for the day. I don't know. But I don't know if that shaking thing happens in every single room or if it was just where I was in the ship, but it was kind of weird. And again, it did happen around the same time, back-to-back nights. So just know that could be a thing. You could wake up, you might think that your bed is possessed by a demon. It might be, but it's probably not. Praise. All right, so that's it for the cons. We've touched on the pros already. Now I just want to kind of touch on some of the general statistics, if you will. We're almost finished. We're almost there. All right, so general statistics, I already touched on the vaccination status again. Generally speaking, everyone needs to be vaccinated. Last I heard, I think they go for like a 95% vaccination rate or something. So there's a chance that maybe if you have some crazy radical medical condition, there's a chance that maybe you might be able to get an exemption, but the odds of you getting an exemption are very, very slim. It's not even that the cruise lines care a ton about you being vaccinated. It's more so the fact that in order for them to get a certain clearance with the CDC, in order to not be deemed as very, very high risk to go on any cruise, they had to put that vaccine mandate in place. So they do enforce it. Again, I don't know if it's 100%. Last I heard, I think it's like 95, 98%, whatever. So just assume you need to be vaccinated if you're going on a cruise. I already mentioned you really don't feel the ship moving a whole lot. There are actually times where, again, since I didn't really know when the ship was leaving most days, or really any day other than the day that we left Miami, there were times where I would be in the shower, say around 4, 5, 6 in the afternoon, and I was like almost certain the ship was leaving the port because I really felt like the ground was moving underneath me. So I finished showering, I went outside, and sure enough, nope, we were still docked in the ports. When you don't know your departure times, just know the ship might be playing games with your head. And there's a chance maybe there were big waves that were just rocking the boat, doubtful. It could have been all sorts of things. But generally speaking, you don't really feel the ship moving, but if there's uncertainty and stuff going on, sometimes the ship can play mind games, and sometimes you think the ship is moving when it's not actually. Drink packages, it's a very highly discussed topic when people go onto cruises, especially with Royal Caribbean. I personally did not get a drink package. The reason being, one, I do not drink alcohol. With that being said, if you do get a drink package with alcohol, the only way to really make your money's worth is if you drink like 5 or more alcoholic beverages per day. So something to keep in mind. Additionally, they do have soda packages as well, because soda, handcrafted coffee, and other specialty drinks, non-alcoholic, are not included in the initial cruise without buying a separate package or buying things a la carte on the cruise. I did not get a drink package because in order for the drink package to kind of pay for itself, I would have had to drink about 10 sodas per day. Granted, drink packages do fluctuate in costs literally by the day, because they're on sale one day, they're not on the next. You can get them 50% off one day, 20% off the next day, 100% charge the next day. So maybe when I was looking at the drink package, I just wasn't looking at the right time. Maybe if I had looked a week later, maybe they would have been on a different deal or something. But when I looked at the drink package, it was definitely not worth my money because I don't drink soda, I don't drink alcohol. So what I did when I was on the ship, I had 1 coffee per day. The rest of the time I just drank water. I mean, that's what my diet is most days anyway. So I paid a la carte, I paid like $6 or whatever for a coffee each day of the cruise, and then the rest of the time I just drank water. So my drink expenses were about $6 per day, whereas if I would have gotten a drink package, it would have been about $30 or $40 a day. So I think I got a pretty good trade deal on that one. Last thing I want to talk about is restaurant reservations. So there was one dining reservation I did book in advance, and that was for a Japanese restaurant where I had hibachi, which was really, really fun. The hibachi chef was very, very entertaining. The people I was dining with, they were not at all entertaining. They were very dull. They were deadbeats and not laughing or participating in anything. But the hibachi chef did an incredible job. The food was excellent at this restaurant, but I did book my hibachi dinner restaurant reservation in advance. This is something that I had to pay extra for. Because I booked it on advance, the cost was about $35 for my meal, including gratuity. Had I booked it there on the ship, it would have been $56. I saved $20 just by booking my dinner in advance and prepaying for it in advance. Granted, I did give the hibachi chef an extra, I think it was like an extra $10 tip, just because I thought he did a great job. And it was one of those things I was like, well, this is the only time I really am tipping the entire cruise because all the other gratuities are included. I actually did leave a tip for my stateroom attendant as well because he was just that good. But anyway, yeah, it was a really, really good experience. I would say if you think at any point you might be tired of the main dining room or like going to the Windjammer every day, 3 times a day, to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the Windjammer, I would highly recommend booking at least one meal in advance that you have to pay extra for, because you will save money by booking in advance versus paying for it on the ship. As you will with most amenity and most excursions, you usually do save money if you book in advance and pay in advance versus paying for it on the ship. So yeah, that's my advice. That's my experience on my first cruise. Those are my pros and cons. If you have any questions or any tips for future cruises, because I do look forward to going on another Royal Caribbean cruise in the future, please leave a comment down below or send me a message and I'll be happy to hear what you got to say or ask or help you in any way I can. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you again in the future. Have a great day. Bye.